guys, welcome back to Partnership Playbook. So we are talking all things online business growth, as you can see, without relying on social media. So I want to get a quick gauge. If you were here last week or you watched the replay, I want to know kind of what your biggest takeaways were. Like, was there an aha moment for you? Was there I think this concept for a lot of people is just a new perspective, which is awesome. And like I said, I'm going to hit on a little bit of like a recap from what we hit on last week. And I'll go into more from there. But I want to know from you guys, like, what kind of stood out to you? What was kind of like I said, either a new perspective, an aha moment, just kind of like a new idea, maybe a new direction to be going in. Because I want to know what stuck with you the most. That way, as we go through this session, especially, I'll be able to kind of dive in a little bit deeper to anything that I know has resonated a little bit more. So whatever you guys like, feel free to just drop them in the chat. Any ideas that you have, anything that had been helpful. I'm going to read a couple of them and then I'll dive into this. Creating more leverage was the biggest takeaway. Toby says, awesome. Something I've been thinking about a lot. I love to hear that. Sweet. Tamika says, the list you provided, because it expanded where I'm looking for partners. That's huge. So we're going to talk a lot today about like kind of the nitty gritty around that, like how to be, where to find those. Yes. But also how to be starting to facilitate that. And you guys also will, I don't think Rob has sent it out yet. You guys will get a like tailored workbook from me. So we're going to go over a lot of what's in the workbook towards the end of today's session. And then action items for you guys going forward are just going to be to kind of work through that workbook and use that to start to kind of like have a jumping off point, if you will. Cool. Jackie says sponsorship. Never really thought of doing that in my business. Yeah. So, okay. Sweet. So I'm glad to hear all of these kind of like takeaways. So a little bit of a recap for anybody that is new, didn't get to catch the replay yet. Like I said, definitely go back and do that if you have time this week. But we talked about how we can kind of allow ourselves to come away from social media a little bit. And this is not to say that we aren't still using social media, because I do think that we're living in a world where it's never going to go away, right? Like social media by nature, in like the ecosystem that we have kind of created online, the environment that we've created online, collectively, all of us, as business owners, is necessary, right? And so we talked a little bit about using our social media as kind of like our virtual business card, using that to establish kind of our uh, just kind of authority almost, right? To show our professionalism, to be able to give kind of evidence that we are the expert in our fields. I think all of that is incredible. But being able to use it for that specifically and not rely entirely on it for our income, right? Because we don't have any control over the algorithm. And I think that's when it comes down to it for me, this is what kind of pushed me into this whole partnerships realm, is because the idea of not having power over, like not having control over who sees my content, about like how it goes out, what, like how much of it somebody sees, it just doesn't sit right with me that as the owner of the business, we're not in control. So using these other pathways, it really allows us to get in front of audiences in a way that we kind of have more say over, really, right? We can determine terms with, when we're starting to partner with somebody, it's set in stone what that looks like. And of course, using anything virtual is we're going to play the algorithm into a little bit of that, but it looks a lot different and we have a lot less riding on specifically that. So all of that to say, we're talking about using leverage, right? I think there were a couple of references to that in the chat already, and being able to use leverage as a means of working smarter, not harder, right? Other people already have all of these assets built. Other people's audiences are ready and willing to buy. So how do we then get in front of those people, as opposed to starting from scratch and building from the ground up, right? So it's kind of the way that I want us all to be thinking. And that's the frame that I want to use for this. So some of the examples that I gave, Natasha said, I hope I'm saying your name correctly. Natasha said, creating more leverage in the example of McDonald's and Coca-Cola. Okay. So that example is so powerful for me. And I put that in my recap. I want to talk about it. And I will I'll spare you the whole story. I went through all of it. Like there's a lot of detail to this. So the context you'll have to watch the replay for. But so McDonald's and Coca-Cola, if you've ever been to McDonald's, you know that they sell Coca-Cola products, right? Everybody talks about McDonald's Diet Coke being the best of the best. That's the good stuff. And so the reason being is ultimately that they have an exclusive partnership. And so like there's an exclusivity deal between the two. McDonald's only sells Coca-Cola products, only Coca-Cola beverages. So knowing that, Coca-Cola's revenue in 2023, obviously a large company, in 2023 was $46 billion. Now, 4.6 billion of that, 10% of that came from McDonald's alone. And I think that showcases that none of Coke didn't do any of that marketing. That's just by nature, by the nature of people going to McDonald's. So McDonald's is spending all of their ad dollars, all of their marketing dollars. And because of this partnership, Coke just automatically gets all of that business. $4.6 billion is nothing to shake a stick at. 10% of revenue is nothing to shake a stick at, right? Even if we think those of us like, think about like a basic six-figure income, right? Think about $100,000 revenue for the year. If $10,000 of that came from a partner that you didn't have to do any work for on the front end, and like all you were concerned about was delivery, how excited would you be about that, right? And scaling that up, if you're doing 300,000 and 30,000 comes from that, that's a lot of money over time, right? So I think that that kind of puts things into perspective. Okay. I'm gonna people usually butcher my name. So I'm trying to keep an eye on the chat. So like if you guys have questions as we go through, definitely let me know. I'm gonna try to answer as much as I can, and then we're gonna do a little bit of Q&A at the end. Hopefully you'll have some time for that. So those that McDonald's example was helpful too. The other example that I gave, I have a CrossFit nutrition coach client who sponsored a CrossFit podcast, had quite a handful, probably 30 plus inbound applications from just that one sponsorship. And so all of these concepts, Gymshark was another example that I gave. I don't know if any of you are familiar. I imagine some of you are familiar with the Gymshark brand. And they bootstrapped from the get-go. They started out with partnerships. They were not trying to build their social media empire. And of course, now they have, because they have the bandwidth, they have the means for that. But even over the first year, Gymshark ended up doing, I think it was like 500,000 in revenue. And in 2013, just off of partnerships specifically. And of course, I'm sure they had other avenues as well, but predominantly that was the bulk of their sales in their first year, which is like, I think all of that just goes to show there's so much potential here. So, like I said, I don't want to spend too much time here. But the nature of what we're talking about is leveraging other people's audiences to find more leads and make more sales. So, is that making sense for everybody? Anybody that didn't watch the replay or wasn't here last week, are we kind of like, does that make sense? Kind of like the angle that we're starting from, like what we're talking about. If it would be helpful for me to dive a little bit deeper, I can, but I also want to make sure that we have, cool, makes sense. Thumbs up. Awesome. So, okay. Let's go into, I was going to do the drawing now, but then we did it first. So moving on. Let's talk about partnerships and what they are. So the coolest part about this is that there are no rules. Like as a general statement, there are no rules. You guys will see in last week's, when I introduced myself, I talked a little bit about my background, and then I said, I am a big believer in there are no rules. And that is something that I hold very near and dear, because I think that a lot of us, and I think it comes from the school system, right? But a lot of us tend to kind of try to fit what we're doing in a box in a way that is just rule following, right? Like we're doing something the way that we've seen other people do it. We're doing things the way that we've been told to do them before, or just like society's told us to do them. So I think it's really helpful in this situation when we're talking about partnerships specifically, is thinking about like everything we're going to talk about here is all concept, right? We can make this look however we want to look. We can make anything look however we want it to look. So keeping that in mind when we talk about these things, there is no hard and fast. There is no like, oh, this is exactly how you do this. This is exactly how this looks. There is endless freedom around this concept and every other concept that we work with as entrepreneurs. And I think remembering that is really helpful. Okay, so this is the overview here. Partnerships as a whole fall into 5 buckets. This is kind of how I categorize these. So last week, I did say to you guys that I was going to write them on my iPad, then I couldn't connect my iPad. So I went through these and kind of just gave you guys like verbal definitions, but I wanted to write them all out. So I'm going to run back through these with definitions on the screen so you guys can write them down. Definitely would recommend. So this is, let me make sure I'm caught up here. Okay. So partnerships are referrals, endorsements, sponsorships, special appearances, and joint ventures. So this can be any combination of these. We can use these stacked. We can use these at different times. We can use like almost like a fusion of these. And this is where the creativity is yours, right? You can start to have some sort of conversation with another business, and we're essentially building these based on what they have, what assets they have built and what they are looking for. We always want to take the goal, whatever our goal is that we have in mind and that our partner has in mind, and reverse engineer from there. So these are kind of just the structures that we're using to build. So referrals, number one, are someone who sends a potential client our way. So this is, put simply, I want to give you guys some examples here too. And if you have questions, let me know. But this, put simply, is just like, we know, like word of mouth, right? Like when our clients say, oh, a friend of mine could benefit from what you do. Awesome. Like put me in a group message with them. I'm more than happy to chat. Like we know how that goes, right? I think a lot of us, especially at the beginning, build via word of mouth. So referrals are number one. Number two is endorsements. So this is a person or brand publicly vouching for us. This is essentially referrals on steroids. We're doing this on a much larger scale. So when we think about you guys will see this. I think the best example, I don't even have a specific example here, but it's thinking about like a lot of the like big name pop culture type people, like a lot of actors, a lot of actresses will partner with big name brands and will like very clearly announce their support to that brand. You guys know what I'm talking about? So like whether it is like a clothing brand that they're then wearing, whether it is a product that they're using, this is a lot of times this is like the nature of influencership, right? Like an influencer is saying, hey, I endorse this product, more or less, right? This is not to say get into influencer marketing, do what you will, but this is kind of the idea, right? So endorsements being a person or brand publicly vouching for us. That kind of just is the best example that I can give off the bat. Are these making sense for you guys so far? So far, so good. Awesome. Sponsorships are essentially the pay to play. So this is paying in either time, money, value, whatever it is that is necessary as far as value exchange goes, to be featured by another business in front of their audience. So when I say sponsorship, I think about like I just mentioned, I have a client that did a podcast sponsorship. That's a huge one. I have another client actually who is sponsoring a runner in an Ironman coming up, which is another really cool. Like these are kind of the really niche concepts that these aren't mainstream, right? And this is why all of this is so effective, because not everybody's doing it. So like this, I hadn't even planned on going down this rabbit hole, but this is this guy who he owns a fitness and nutrition coaching company, and he is sponsoring one of his buddies who's running an Ironman, and he's getting his logo on the back of his bib. And so we talked about, as part of his logo, and this is just nitty gritty stuff, right? We talked about, as part of his logo, adding a QR code to it, going to either his website, his Instagram, or when we did the sponsorship for the CrossFit podcast that I just referenced a couple of times, we had that QR code go directly to her application. So we talked about potentially putting it to his application. But this is kind of the idea, right? Like getting really creative with where we're putting that, what that looks like, and how we get in front of these people. Obviously, everybody at an Ironman is like, hey, I'm really interested in being fit. So I think it only makes sense to be able to market in a way that we are directly getting in front of these people. Whereas when it comes to like Facebook ads, Instagram ads, things like that, we're bidding for eyes. And I don't know if any of you have experience with media buyers or anybody like an ads agency, anything of that nature. But we're essentially bidding for eyeballs is the way that it works. So when we don't have to bid and we can just surely spend X amount of dollars. Also, Facebook ads, unless you are scaled to the moon, aren't typically as effective anymore. So we end up spending a lot of money for a little bit of eyeballs. Whereas if we can spend a fixed amount for like knowing how many people we're getting in front of, the ROI is almost always higher. So anyway, I will come back from my little tangent, but I want to make sure that I'm kind of like giving some tactical examples here because I think all of this is really helpful. All right. Special appearances, showing up as an expert in front of somebody else's audience. The best example that I can give to you is that this is literally what I'm doing here. This is why you're hearing me talk. This is me as a special appearance with Everfit to be able to sit in front of their audience, sit in front of you guys to be able to talk about this stuff, right? And this can be any sort of like cross contamination is not the right word. Cross pollination. I've worked in restaurants. Can you tell? So when we think about like what types of groups what types of people do we want to get in front of? Where are they already, right? And this is why we talk about. Excuse me. This is why we talk about the 3 F's, which we'll get into again. But who do they follow? What do they fund? And where are they found? Right. So when we think about where is our ideal client already hanging out, we can more effectively figure out, okay, who should we talk to about getting in front of those crowds? So this is the possibilities here are endless. And special appearances specifically tend to be kind of the lowest hanging fruit. They tend to be the easiest to land as far as partnerships go, because this is a one-time thing generally, right? This is like special appearances can almost act as like a first date type situation, right? We don't want to jump right into marriage, but we can go in front of somebody else's audience, see how they receive us, see what the feedback is, see just kind of like in general, was it valuable? And then we can use all of that data, and hopefully that data is being collected. We can use all of that data to figure out, like, is there potential moving forward to have some sort of like more in-depth partnership, or what that could look like, or details from there. So that said, last one here is joint ventures, teaming up with another business to create something of value for both audiences, which I think this here is more often than not, this special appearance leads its way into a joint venture, right? Because we're able to kind of see, okay, what is the like what is the crowd saying, right? Like, what is the feedback, and does it make sense given what that special appearance looked like to craft something collaboratively? So is all of this was the fifth one for you guys. So did I go slow enough to everybody take notes? Are we feeling good about all this? Do I want to go back to any of them? Any questions on anything here? I'll give you guys a second. Okay. Sounds like we are good. All right. So next thing here, all sounds good. Awesome. I want to check in with you guys. I want to know about those of you that did your action items, that have kind of this idea of where your current clients hang out. What other businesses already work with your ideal clients, right? That was one of the other big questions, kind of that brainstorm question that I asked. Not only where are they, but also what other businesses serve them. We talked about, I just referenced the 3 F's, right? The who do they follow, what do they fund, and where are they found, which really boils down to where is their attention already, where is their time already, and where is their money already. So I want to hear from you guys. Drop a few in the chat. Like, as you start to think about those things, I want you to share. I want you guys to brainstorm, collaborate. Take like 2 minutes right now and drop any thoughts that you have about that, whether you did that homework last week or not. Any thoughts that you have about where your ideal client already hangs out. Because I want to start to see these thoughts flowing. And our goal here is to be able to use this to kind of go into the rest of what we're going to talk about here, because it's going to be a little bit more tactical. So while you do that, Mark said golf course is awesome. That's a great one. What I want to run through with you guys is something that I noticed with homework that I received, and also just conversations that I've had in general. What we can do here often is we almost think too big picture a little bit, and thinking golf course and podcast. Okay, this is helpful. So when we hear podcast, right, there are hundreds, thousands of podcasts, right, on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts. Like, they're everywhere. So what we want to do here is, yes, we want to think high level because, like we talked about, when it comes to we're doing what Fortune 500 companies are doing, right? We're employing leverage in that same way. We're just scaling it down to meet our needs, to meet our size. So in on that same coin, if you will, we want to do the same thing here when we're thinking about where our clients already are. So when we're thinking about, okay, I struggled to think beyond big brands when I was doing this homework. Okay, it's helpful, Toby. So when we're looking at, like, okay, my ideal client listens to podcasts. Okay, what kind of podcasts? What are they interested in? Because when we think podcasts, we think like eh, that's like one thing that people do, but I mean, we know there's the gamut runs from the Joe Rogan podcast that's been top 3 for 10 years now, all the way down to your cousin's neighbor who literally has maybe 3 listeners and it's her parents. Like, and God bless, there's nothing wrong with that. But what I'm saying is, like, there clearly is a lot, like there is a huge delta here. So when we start to think about, like, where are we finding these people, we have to get really specific about it. Podcast is a great place to start, that being almost like an action that they take, right? My ideal client typically listens to podcasts. Okay, what kinds of podcasts do they listen to? Are they listening to Call Her Daddy, or are they listening to NPR, right? Like, those are very different. And so it's getting really clear on what types of, so using podcasts as an example here, because I think that it's the easiest to kind of like get really nitty gritty on. When we think about this, think about, okay, what types of podcasts do they listen to? And then think about size. So this is another huge piece in that we using Joe Rogan again as an example, because I think everybody's very familiar with who he is. We as solopreneurs, we as small business owners, typically don't have quite the same in with somebody like Joe Rogan as like someone who is, I don't know, like I, a Peloton instructor, right? Is doing like millions and millions a year, right? Or whatever the case is, right? But like that, the sizes look different and they're a little bit less compatible. So when we think about this, we want to take stock of, like, okay, where are we at right now? And maybe that has to do with like the size of the business. Maybe that has to do with how many clients we've helped. Maybe that has to do with how long we've been in business. Maybe that has to do with the size of our audience, whether that be email or social media or whatever, right? So when we're thinking about pursuing partnerships, we want to pursue partnerships similar to our own size. Um, Okay. Debbie says, after the session last week, I reached out to one of the local schools who's hosting a 5K this weekend, offered to provide the waters for the race, putting my own stickers on the labels. This is exactly what I'm talking about. Way to go, Debbie. That is killer. This is like, how do we use kind of these like a little bit more creative ways, excuse me, to get in front of people that otherwise would have no idea who we are. So, okay, is that like scale conversation making sense to you guys? So like finding businesses that are about the same size. This is not to say that we can't go after businesses that are a little bit larger than us, but I do think just being really aware of like who we're reaching out to, right? So like rather than us reaching out to Peloton, or like a national brand like that, and again, I don't want to discourage anybody from shooting big. I just want to make it known that it doesn't have to be a massive scale in order for it to be effective. It can literally be, we know the nature of what we do in high ticket, like those of us that sell high ticket, like 3, 4, 5 clients makes a big difference in our month, right? So we don't necessarily need to do something on massive scale in order for it to be effective. So okay, Toby says this is helpful. Going to tap into my client community and ask what podcasts they listen to, newsletters they read, etc. This is, yes. Toby just hit on my next point. We literally do not need to guess at this. We can just ask. Like, I know all of you have a handful. When I say ideal client, you have a handful in your head that you're like, these 3 people are like dream client. Like, if I could just have like 15 more of these 3 people, I would be set. Okay, talk to them. Ask them where they hang out, what they listen to, what they do, who they spend time with, right? And like now you have that information that's concrete. And now we can use that to make our next moves, right? Okay. Um, sweet. So by now we know that the fastest, easiest, most effective way to bring in more leads and make more sales is by using other people's audiences, right? We know that leverage is always going to be the most effective vehicle for, I don't know if vehicle was the right word there, but you guys get the point, right? Leverage is always going to be the most effective tool, rather, to see the success that we want to see over time, right? So, and I guess I should rephrase this a little bit. So I think when it comes to referrals, that can be extremely fast. When it comes to longer term partnerships, I think one of the reasons that more people don't pursue this is that sometimes these partnerships do take longer to establish, right? Because when we're thinking about, rather than like, we sell generally B2C, right? We talk directly to our clients, and it's easy, like same day, essentially, hey, I want to come in and work with you. It's like, okay, paid, onboarded, like easy business. It can happen in a matter of hours. Whereas with these larger companies, even if it's a smaller company, but it's a larger operation than just a single person, it takes a little bit longer because there's more hoops to jump through, right? There's more people to get on board. There's more just like to organize, right? So in that case, not always the fastest, but absolutely the most effective, in my humble opinion. So okay, let's get into, I want to show you guys first too. I put a couple of these screenshots in here. I just want to show you guys what this can do, because I mentioned this a little bit and I'm going to touch on them again. Just a couple of the couple of the clients that I've worked with, a couple of just like coaches that I've seen start to pursue this, the outcome is insane. So you guys can see these screenshots. These are a couple of just like wins from clients. But a couple of the notable takeaways that I shared last week for anybody that wasn't here, is that this has allowed clients of mine to get in front of email lists of 20,000 plus. I maybe not all like 100% ideal clients, but 20,000 potential clients, get in front of like social media accounts, right? So like if you are collaborating with somebody who has a large following, get in front of accounts of 20,000 plus that were not their followers, right? This is again that leveraging other people's audiences. To speak in front of hundreds, 300, 400, 500 of also their potential ideal clients. So I just want to see, like, I want you guys to see the scale that is allowed here, because when we're just putting things on social media, and again, not like, this is not to say don't use any of that at all. But when we're doing that, we're only typically reaching, depending on the size of our audience, maybe a couple hundred at once. Whereas when we have these kind of collaborations going and we have these back channels to be using, email lists, getting in front of groups, whatever the case is, whatever their kind of like internal communication is, we're able to get in front of way more people with way less guesswork. So I wanted you guys to be able to see some of this coming from that. All right. So now I blew through a lot of that the past few slides, with the goal of spending a little bit more time here. So we're going to talk about how. And like I said, you guys are going to get a lot of this in just about everything I'm about to go through. Yeah. In the workbook that I sent that over to Rob, so you guys will have access to that. I imagine probably that will go out with this replay. And so we're going to talk through a lot of that here, but don't feel like you have to, I mean, take notes definitely if that's helpful for you. But you'll see a lot of the questions that I'm going to ask, you'll see them in that workbook. So be able to go back and do a lot of this as well. All right. So our step one is define the goal. With anything, as with anything, we want to make sure that we're not kind of just shooting blind. We're not just like shot in the dark. So we want to make sure that whatever it is that we're doing, we have a desired outcome, right? What is the specific outcome that we're looking for? And so when I say that, what I mean is, are we looking for more leads? Are we looking for increased brand visibility? Are we looking for like expanded reach, expanded exposure? What is it that is our win that we're after, right? And I think that in different seasons of business, as in different seasons of life, we have different goals, right? We might be in a place where like our roster is pretty full, but we want to expand our exposure so that we can start to, next time we launch, we can start to build a wait list, right? Maybe it is that we want more leads in the short term because we're looking to fill our roster for this month or next month, right? So it's figuring out what is our next goal, what is our like next checkpoint, if you will, and then we want to reverse engineer from there. So first we want to think about our ideal audience, and this is what we just talked about a little bit in the recap, and I gave you guys a little bit of an overview on, is getting really clear on our ideal client first and foremost, but then where they spend their time. And I think one of the nuances here that's really helpful to think about is, even if I'm trying to think about how to articulate this in a way that makes sense. So even if we work exclusively online, we can still think about where they shop in person, where they spend time in person, right? And I mean, I coach entirely online, and I had facilitated relationships with I was doing some nutrition coaching. That was part of what I was partnering for. And I partnered with some local boxing gyms where I was. And I still, like, all of the work that I was doing was still online, but it was it was referrals. It was them sending me people. So thinking about it from that perspective, I think it opens up a lot. Whereas like when we think about it kind of a little bit more narrow-mindedly, it is a little bit more challenging, right? Because we think about like, oh, we only work online. Where are these people hanging out specifically online? Yes, that's really helpful, but that really is only part of it. So same goes for vice versa, right? So like if you work in person, you are more apt to think like, where am I finding these people in person? Where do they hang out online? What Facebook groups are they in? What Reddit threads are they reading? You know, like these kinds of ideas where it ends up being really helpful to like allow those things to cross. Hopefully all of that is making sense for you guys. So like I said, and if you are taking notes, definitely take these down. So who do they follow? What do they fund? Where are they found? And that comes down to, where are they directing their attention? Where are they spending their time? Where are they spending their money? And getting as specific as we can about all of these is insanely valuable. So with all of that in mind, we want to get really clear on what our unique offer is, because it allows us to position ourselves effectively in front of any of these partners, right? So what is the unique value or expertise that you bring to a partnership? And it's not, oh, I help people get healthy. I help people get fit, right? It's not, I help people eat better. And I'm sure you guys have done all of these exercises of like the I help statement, and like getting really clear on your unique advantage, and like having, you know, the thing that makes you you, and like makes it so that somebody's coming to you over your competition, right? Competition. So use that and get really clear on that, because that's going to be what allows us to kind of lead into these partnership proposals. Because once we start to introduce ourselves, it's really important for us to have like a shtick almost, right? What makes us valuable? Like what makes us an asset that they would want to leverage, right? And thinking about it like that, I think, can be really helpful. Let's see. We'll be able to access to have replay. I'm at work working on a client. This is great info. Hope you have another one soon. Yes, you will. This will all go, this as well as the first one will go out as a replay. Thanks for being here. I'm glad that it's been helpful. So okay, so unique offer. Is that making sense for you guys? Like having that kind of unique advantage, having that specific, like there's something that makes you you, and getting really clear on that, because that's one of the things that we want to make sure we're presenting to potential partners. Awesome. Cool. Thumbs up on that. Fantastic. All right. So now we brainstorm, we qualify, and we prep. Um, what are complementary but not competing businesses that serve our ideal client? What other professionals do they hire? What we talked a little bit about this. What blogs, or like, no, what podcasts do they listen to? What blogs do they read? What newsletters do they read? Right? Where are they finding their information? Where are they perusing? You know, like where are they hanging out? Um, what other thought leaders does your audience follow? Right? Who else are they? It doesn't have to be massive influencers. It just is like, who else are they paying attention to? It doesn't have to be individual people either. It can be like publications. It can be, again, back to podcasts, right? What other professionals do they hire is always going to be the easiest angle to approach. Because when we are thinking about strategic partnerships, almost always other service providers are going to be the easiest sell. And the reason I say that is because they understand what we do and even if they don't understand on a granular level what we do, they understand that as service providers, we're like, we get paid for our knowledge. We get paid for like the service that we provide, right? So when we think about partnering with chiropractors, dating coach, osteopaths, pelvic health coach, exactly, Jackie. Yes, this is like, you're hitting the nail on the head here. So who else, like what other professionals do they go to? Do they hire cleaning companies? Do they hire dog walkers? Do they like I truly mean, like, where do they spend their money? Thinking so far outside of the realm of health and fitness, because I think we get really again, like laser focused, which is not a bad thing, but in this instance we have to break out of it a little bit. We get really laser focused on just this industry, and just like the ancillary pieces of this industry, meaning like the like super adjacent businesses, right? Massage therapy, physical therapist, right? And all of those are absolutely valid and valuable, but think way outside of that too, right? Think about like, again, what like who are the house cleaners that they're hiring, right? And I think that's a silly example, but that's what I mean by like, who else can we bring into our ecosystem that can, again, cross pollinate? um cool. My niche is successful women business owners. Awesome. So now that you know that, like, you know where they, because of that, and I saw this in your homework, Tamika, like, you know, what are the types of like other professionals they're probably hiring to save time, to buy their time back, right? They're probably hiring other service providers so that they are like having to do less on their own. Yeah. Okay. Travel agents. Awesome. You guys are, this is exactly what we're talking about here. So I think these questions can be helpful, right? The what other brands do they tend to buy from? What other professionals do they hire? It just really helps us get super clear on, okay, who are my potentials? Like, who could I even collaborate with? Um, and now when childminders, exactly, yes, exactly. So now that we have a list, ideally, right, we want to keep a running list of these. Like, I don't know about you guys, but I use the notes app in my phone for literally everything. If I lose my iCloud password, I am screwed. I don't, this is, I my life is in these freaking notes. I have my notes that I'm talking to you guys about, they're up in front of me in Apple Notes, like, so, but keep a running list of these in, and just like anytime you think of a new potential, add it in there, and then make like a little sub list of like any that you know. So you think about house cleaners as an example, right? Who cleans your house? Who cleans your friends' houses? Who cleans your mom's house, right? Who are those people? And now you have like actual names, and that there is no better action item than a name of somebody to reach out to, right? Like to have a conversation with. So now that we have this running list, we want to qualify. One, do they have an audience that overlaps with ours? And this one gets a little like, I think there's gray area here, right? Because we don't always know exactly, but we also don't have to know exactly. Is there any sort of overlap in who they like, the types of people that they attract and the types of people that you attract? Because we always want to make sure that a partnership is symbiotic in every way. So thinking about, is there overlap there? And now that you know that, again, let me take a step back. If there isn't overlap, that doesn't mean this is not a valuable potential partnership. It just means that we might need to set it up a little bit differently, because we're not looking at like an even swap necessarily of audiences. Whereas it, like, we still have plenty of value to provide to them. It just might not be, the value that we're providing them may not be exposure to our audience. Does that make sense? Okay. So where did I just leave off there? Okay. Do they regularly collaborate with others is another one. And this, again, by no means is a make or break. There, just because a business or a business owner has not in the past or does not regularly collaborate with others, does not mean that there is not potential there. Especially if we go into this conversation knowing what we're doing, knowing what we offer, and knowing what we're asking for, which comes way later. The ask is never first. It's never even close to first. We are we're likely to land it anyway. It doesn't mean that like they don't have to have like necessarily any experience with partnerships in the past. Just helpful to know that, to use as a qualifier, because those are typically going to be easier to establish because they have the experience in that, on that front. And how could we provide to their audience? How could we provide value? What do we have of value for them? And this is huge because we want to in every scenario, and I cannot possibly stress this enough, how do we go in giving? Actually, I've been talking to clients about this a lot lately and about how we can structure this. We always, always, always want to go in giving. So when we think about what assets we have built, think about what we have available to us, meaning do we have freebies that we've built out? Do we have like week-long challenges? Do we have like a complimentary session? Do we have whatever the case is, right? We have like, just as business owners, we've amassed our list of assets. We've built stuff over time that has been helpful to people, right? What like resources do we give clients? That kind of thing. So it's getting really just like remembering what we have to be able to offer, getting really clear on what of what I have of value could be of value to this potential, and then going in offering that, going in giving that. So sometimes that looks like a resource we built, sometimes it looks like our time, sometimes it looks like another connection that we have with somebody, right? Sometimes it looks like our network. Like, our assets don't have to necessarily just be what we've built physically. They can be, I mean, they can be our intellectual property, but they can also be our audience, our network, like we just talked about, kind of hitting on a few of those. So I'm throwing a lot at you guys. Is all of this making sense so far? I know I'm kind of firing through a lot of this, but like I said, you'll have all of these questions that I'm asking, kind of everything I'm hitting on, you'll have in the workbook. But I want to make sure that everybody's with me. I try to ask a lot of questions, but sometimes I just get in the zone and I gotta fire off a lot of words. Okay, making sense? Give me some thumbs ups, some whatever. Makes sense. Awesome. Yep. Sweet. Rock on. Okay. Love to hear it. I always got to check, got to do the temp check. All right. So brainstorm, qualify, prep. Our prep, like I said, is go in giving. And then the last piece here is, how can we highlight mutual benefits of the partnership, right? How can we when I'm going in to have this initial conversation, I'm essentially saying, the example that I'll use here is when my nutrition company was reaching out to these boxing gyms, because I knew that a lot of them they didn't have anybody in-house that was doing anything like food related with them. So I knew that their recovery probably was a little bit lacking. I specifically, in these reach outs, said, I forget exactly what the line was, but something along the lines of like, I know that like the better fueled your fighters are, the like better they perform, or something along those lines. And that was me subliminally highlighting, this is what I'm going to do for your guys that they don't currently have, that is going to be really valuable, right? A lot of these boxing gyms want to send their fighters off to be pros, essentially, right? They want to send them off because it looks really good on the gyms. So when the way that I positioned what I was offering was, hey, this is going to get you guys closer to your goal. This has nothing to do with me. I don't like, it doesn't matter what this looks like for me. I'm going in giving this opportunity to you guys, right? So I was offering to give a talk. I was offering to like give resources to them so that they could help their guys recover better so that they did better, right? Cool. Kurt says great info. Love it. Thanks, Kurt. So that's what I mean by like, how do we highlight the mutual benefits of the partnership without getting, when I say mutual benefits, I mostly mean highlight the benefits that we like of our counterpart, right? We're not talking about like how it's going to benefit us off the bat. Which I think another important point here is one of the most common mistakes I see with this is when we start sending reach outs. And one of the pieces in your workbook is an example template reach out. I'll get to that in just a second. One of the most common downfalls I see is a business owner reaching out to establish a partnership and pitching terms in the first email. That is absolutely how you get we're not going on another date. We are never getting married. I don't want to see you again. I'm not even showing up to coffee. That is exactly how we shut somebody down immediately. And actually, let me go. I'm gonna take a step back and make sure that I'm going in order. So actually, no, I'm gonna go with that. So you guys tell I have a lot to tell you. I'm trying to organize my thoughts as I'm going. But so so when we are initially sending this reach out, when we're like trying to talk about terms off the bat, when we're trying to say, hey, like if you send me your people, I'll send you my people, like that is where it's almost off-putting. Or like we say, a couple of the emails that I've seen, like clients that have come to me that have been like, hey, I'm working on partnerships, I need a little bit of help with it. I've had them come to me saying like, I don't know why it's not working. And some of the emails that they've sent out are like, oh, we want to offer you a 10% for this thing for, okay, first of all, that's not what they're looking for. That's not aligned with that business's goals. They don't want a kickback. That's not that, like, that isn't effective for them. That's not helpful. And two, those numbers probably don't make any sense to them. They don't like, they're not, this isn't at all in the realm of like what they're looking for or what they're open to. So rather than any of that, the best thing that we can do is just try to get our foot in the door. Like we want to go in giving, we want to offer to do something, to provide something to them for nothing, and have a conversation with them. Our goal is truly just to get them on the phone, to be able to like learn about what they're working on, what projects do they have in the works, what are their next benchmarks, what's coming up for them, and then figuring out, okay, how do we weave what we are doing into their goal so that it's now a shared goal. Hopefully that makes sense, right? So we start getting out there is what we do. This is next steps is we start sending emails. Emails are my preferred way to do this. I tend to find that they're received the most professionally, as opposed to, I would not recommend doing this via Facebook Messenger or Instagram messages. um Even really text message, I mean, if you're close with somebody, I think it's fine. But anyway, I like sending emails and getting at like going into these places if they're local to you, and just having conversations with the owner, right? Seeing what makes sense. And this is one of those things that like we have to put the reps in, right? We have to be able to go do it a few times to see what feels good for us, what is our preferred communication method. So like I said, you guys will have in the workbook that you'll have sent to you, you're going to get an email template. So what I want you to do with that is doctor it up, make it yours. I've never been one for scripts, but I do think that having an outline can be really valuable. But I want to make sure that you are using it to edit. Make sure that you are making it sound just conversational, right? Like we don't want to sound robotic. We're talking to humans in any scenario, no matter who we're reaching out to. Making it sound professional, but not hyper formal, right? We're talking business to business. We're like just like you would say to an old friend kind of thing, right? That's my approach. Some people may not agree with that. That's fine. They're not me. So I want these literally to just go out as like conversation pieces. And our goal is to open the door to a phone call, to like a little bit of a deeper dive, and then start to explore, okay, how can we do something that's mutually beneficial here, right? All right. All of this making sense for next steps, what that looks like. You guys will, like I said, have the template. I want to make sure that we have a little bit of time for questions too. Um, but before we get into that, I just want to give you guys the why, because I think that it's really helpful. And we talked a little bit about this last week. But from where I'm standing, there's a gap in the industry here. There is so much untapped potential and just underserved audience, right? Like when we go all in on social media, yes, absolutely, we're reaching like what could be a lot of people. However, there are also an equal lot of people who are not on social media, who are, even if they have accounts, they aren't using them regularly. They're not. I think that we've gotten to a point where social media is fairly polarizing, right? And there's been a lot of like like TikTok addiction type thing, right? Like we all of us to some degree want to stop scrolling. And so I think because of that, we're noticing a little bit of a migration away from so much time on social. And there are so many other avenues to get in front of people. It doesn't make sense to put all of our eggs in that one basket. So that's why I do this. That's why I do this in my business. It's why I teach this. This is why I work on this with clients, right? Um, not to mention, I don't know about you guys, but my bills come every month. So like I can't afford to rely on the algorithm to make sure that I am finding clients, getting paid, whatever. So obviously the goal here is to make big money even with a small following so that we don't have to rely on social media. We don't have to like put all of our eggs in that basket, and we can make the impact and the income and have the freedom that we started for without the shackles.